jump in. Let me go back to the beginning. Your involvement with the Mavericks. How did that come about?
Well, I used to be a DJ in New York, club DJ, for years, and got tired of living in New York and moved to Miami and doing dance remixes and working in some clubs down there as well, but I was just getting tired of it. And at a certain point, I actually bumped into a guy that I knew from down there. His name was John Tovar, Tovar, and he was working with the Mavericks. He was the first guy that actually was there. And Raul had been in a band where he was a bass player and actually the backup singer, he wasn't the lead singer. And he got tired of it and started writing some songs. And John was working with a band called Nuclear Valdez. And at the time, Raul didn't know what to do with it, so he went to John, and John tried to help him put something together, and he did. He had a guitar player. He was the first guitar player in the Mavericks, a guy named Ben Peeler. And ultimately, he just he took a couple of guys from Nuclear Valdez as a rhythm section and put Raul and Ben and these two guys from Nuclear Valdez together just to see what would happen. They worked up some songs that Raul had written and some covers, and that's how it started. And then Bobby and Paul came into the mix very soon after. We're talking like probably the fall of '89, and so that's how the Mavericks formed. And then John, became their manager. Now John would come to me from the beginning of '90, and I had seen the band in like a local club in Miami Beach. And thought they were really good, and I was doing, again, some remixes and DJing. And he would ask me, like, what do you think? What could you do to help me turn me on to some A&R people that I knew? And I told him that, my contacts were like either New York or London or LA, and that this, to me, sounded like you need to take it to Nashville, and I didn't know anybody there. And whatever, so he kept, calling here and there, and one day I jokingly said, the amount of times that you've called and the amount of assistance or input that I'm giving you, I would imagine to stand with you. And he said, well, gee, that's a good idea. Would you be interested in it? And it never occurred to me. It wasn't like an aspiration, but the moment he said it, it just, wow, it really hit me. And what's funny is that I had heard their demo. I was doing a remix for Public Image. They were doing like Virgin was putting out a dance remix version of a bunch of their songs. And this is a long way to get to where I am, but it's all right. I was doing this remix, and we pulled everything off the tracks except Lydon's vocals. And it was excruciating just to listen to Johnny Lydon sing with nothing else around him. And so I said, let's take a break. And he goes, boy, you want to hear a great vocalist, you ought to hear this demo of this band that's called the Mavericks. And I thought, wow, that's the same band that John had. And I heard the voice and thought, God, what an amazing voice. And heard This Broken Heart, which was one of the songs, and thought, God, that's a killer. And so it stayed in my mind. And then when John would come up to me, it was like, oh, yeah, that's the band I heard. And I thought, man, these guys are great. We really ought to go for it. Whatever. So when he asked me that question, it was like, okay, everything kind of like fit in the sense that, yeah, I believe in this. And as a DJ in New York, I would always, like, if it was the Mud Club or whatever, try and throw in, like, Ring of Fire or when Dwight came out early on, just a Dwight song or, Little Sister or whatever. And always trying to throw in some country here and there, just for fun, but also because I love country, as much as I like rock and roll. And I always had this feeling that as MTV progressed and as VH1 progressed and as country music was progressing to a certain extent, that country was getting to where like the Eagles were once, and that now that's what that if the Eagles came out during that same period of time, the end of the '80s, early '90s, they would probably be on a country label versus an LA label. So it made sense to me. It just all made sense. I don't want to sit here and say, well, I predicted the explosion of country, but it felt right. And I was in a position where I wanted to make a change. So for some reason said, yeah, okay, I'll do it. And met with the band. You know, they looked at me as, I think initially as like, okay, so who's this ringer from New York, some DJ, you know, what does he know about us or music, whatever. And we started talking about different types of music, and I think Raoul and I started talking about Jimmy Reed. And the song specifically, I think, was Baby What You Want Me to Do, and he knew it from Elvis, and he knew who Jimmy Reed was, but we clicked, I think, on that point, and so we started. And the first thing that really came up, aside from John, who was booking the band in local clubs, because he had a lot of contacts, was Richard Ulloa, who was the guy that ran a record store called Yesterday and Today Records. He came to me and said, would you be interested in putting the Mavericks on a compilation record of unsigned Miami bands that I'm thinking of putting out, and starting a small little record label, which he was going to call Y&T Music, based on Yesterday and Today record store. And I said, well, yeah, I'd be interested, but what about a full-fledged Maverick record? Because I knew this guy was a fan. And he loved the idea, so we made a deal that we would, and to me, I hated the idea of sending a Maxell tape or whatever, you know, TDK tape to, you know, as a demo. Because, you know, knowing the different A&R people I knew through just friends and acquaintances and spinning New York through the late 70s and early 80s, they always get these tapes, you know, and I always remember people telling me, A&R guys saying that, you know, when you see something that like an independent CD or just some sort of effort past a demo on a cassette, that shows a sign of seriousness. So I thought, well, this would be a great presentation. So we made a deal where we would pay for the recording and deliver mastered tapes. We would own those mastered tapes, and then they being Richard and his label, would manufacture and distribute it. And we agreed on a certain amount of, you know, initial pressings, whatever, and that became, for me, my tool as a demo. And then we did that I think we recorded it during the fall of 90, and got to a point where right at the beginning of 91, you know, we had a little release party, and it came out in like February. And right around the same period of time, John and myself, we had formed a management company. We agreed that we would continue working together with other acts, but that I took on the reins of working the Mavericks. And it was for a couple of different reasons. And, you know, one of the main reasons was that because we were working with other acts, because there was a burgeoning club scene down there, that it made sense to let John handle most of that, and we would confer on it, but I would do the day-to-day with the Mavericks, because we now had you know, the quote-unquote demo that I wanted, and it made sense. And one of the first things I did was contact a guy named Clay Brad, who works for BMI. And I thought, well, I didn't really know anybody in Nashville, and I didn't know who to go to. And I thought, well, Raoul's, you know, a BMI writer, so why not utilize their contacts? You know, it's like no one ever utilizes that part of it. They just figure, like, okay, when money comes in, they'll cut you a check, but you know, they have as many contacts as anybody. So I sent him up a whole bunch of CDs and cassettes of this independent record, and asked him to like pass it around to, you know, different people. And through the course of myself doing that with Clay, and also Richard had some contacts. One of the people he sent it to immediately was Holly Gleason, and Holly passed it on to a number of different people, one of them being Paige Levy at Warner Brothers, and she became interested from that. Another person that we gave it to was a guy named David Miller, who at the time just started working for Uni, and he passed it on to a regional promotion guy in Atlanta, and for the life of me, I can't remember his name right now. I'll remember it, but and that guy passed it on to Bruce and Tony at MCA, and that led Renee Bell, who was then working for Tony at MCA, to come down, see the band, and we just got a whole buzz thing going on up here in Nashville. And what was really interesting was that everybody, my whole feeling was that if Clay, for example, could pass these CDs and cassettes to producers, other writers, A&R people, whatever, that because of the strength that I felt these songs were so strong, and Raul's voice and just the whole band in general, that since Nashville was, quote unquote, about songs and songwriting, that there would be, hopefully a buzz and an interest going on, and it worked. And then, people heard that Paige came down to see us, and people heard that Renee came down, and so did Tracy Gershon, who was at Sony Tree, and a couple other publishers came down, and Steve Fishel, who ended up co-producing the first MCA record with Raul, came down. And they saw the show and loved it, and it got to a point where Renee said, "This is great, Tony Brown's got to see this," and spoke with Tony, and Tony's feeling was, is this all there is? Because if it is, I'm not interested, but if there's more, if this is just the tip of the iceberg, then I really, then I'm really interested. So of course I told him there was more. one of my best managerial decisions, and in the process, he said he needed to see the band, but he didn't have the time to come down to Miami, and so talking to him, I asked him if he would fly us up, and he kind of laughed, and I mean ultimately he did. He paid for the whole band to come up there, myself, a crew to rent a Ryder truck and drive the equipment, and we played the exit in. And one of the things that Tony and I both agreed on with Renee Bell was that we really wanted to showcase this band. If we're going to do this for MCA, we want to showcase it to everybody at MCA so that they feel that they're part of the discovery. If in fact the showcase goes well and Tony and Bruce think it's great, and the rest of the company is there, they'll feel that they're part of the sign per se, the moment. And that worked, and we did the exit in. And what was really exciting was that at one point, before we went up there, I asked Tony if it was okay if I invited anybody else to the showcase. And he thought that was rather ballsy, but he just said, "Yeah, okay, just don't tell me anything about it. Don't let me know anything about it. Just do it. I don't want to hear about it." And so we did, and it turned out to be one of the most well-attended showcases in years. It's not based on what I know. Coming up to Nashville for the first time, it was based on what everyone was telling me after the fact, that it was just an amazing turnout. And we had different labels there, different publishers, and it got to a point where they actually had to wait outside during this horrible hot heat. It was in the middle of May of '91. And we were sound checking, and Tony's going like, come on, hurry up, we got all these people waiting outside. And what's funny is that Raul had just written Forever Blue, a song that ended up on the first MCA record, a few weeks before. And he used that as the sound checks, the song to sound check with. And halfway through the song, Tony and Bruce start talking, and I'm starting to get, nervous, thinking, oh God, they hate it. And then Tony comes walking over to me, and I'm going, oh, he doesn't even want to do the show. I'm just thinking all the worst thoughts I could because I'm nervous and anxious. Anyway, he comes over to me and he says, "You've got a deal if you want," right? Based on the sound check, and they hadn't even finished the song. So it was exciting, and at one point, Renee Bell and I said, "Do we tell the band?" And I thought these guys were so nervous. Let's relieve the pressure and let them just go out there and knock them out, knowing that they've already been offered a gig, and it worked. I mean, they did. They went out there and they knocked it out. So that was the beginning of it, and I think the exciting part of that whole period of starting to work with them, say, around, I think it was like May or so of 1990, and then getting the offer to be signed in May of '91 within a year, it was exciting. I mean, it was brand new territory for me, and I'd been around managers before and groups and artists, but never really thought of doing it. Always in the back of my mind figuring, well, I could do that, but never really trying to or aspiring to. So it was exciting. It was a great feeling of accomplishment, obviously with the band, but also for myself. That's how I got involved.
Great story.
Yeah, it was fun. I mean, it was fun because we were all new at this.
Yeah.
I was green, the band was green. I mean, they were all musicians, and they weren't green on a musical level. It was just, we were going to another level, and none of us had ever been there, and that, in any capacity of what we were doing. Me as a manager, them as a band, as an artist, getting signed to a label. It was great, and I must say that that there were other offers from other record companies, but we felt very comfortable with Tony because of his, and Bruce but more so because of Tony's background on a left of center basis with Steve Earle and Lyle Lovett and Nancy Griffith. At the same time, he was very willing to allow the band to be themselves. I think Tony had a great vision that this band, obviously the songwriting and the singing of Raul, but that there was a magic about the combination of the people. And as it developed, I think he's been proven right. Because Raul's developed as a singer, the band's developed as a unit and an entity, and at the same time, they've always let us be who we are. They've let the band develop into what they are now without ever saying, try and do this because this will work on radio. I mean, sure, there was always, in the back of everyone's mind, let's try and cut stuff that's going to work for radio, but it was never, let's try and be this so that since that worked, we'll do it too, and then it'll work for us. There's always a different approach in the sense that everybody just did what came naturally, and then we would give that to MCA, and they ran with it. That's how I started.
So when did you decide to move?
I'll go back. We got signed in actually July of '91. We started recording in September of '91, and recorded the first MCA album from Hell of Paradise. And then there was like a lull for a while because they wanted to. It was the end of the year, and then it was a good time to put the product out. And we went to '92, and eventually got to release. I think the album was released in May of '92. And the first thing we did was we did a thing called an Edging Around tour. Any of you guys talk to you about this at all? No. It was some of the MCA records, I think Walt Wilson and his marketing staff came up with. And the idea was on a cost-effective basis, but also just all these different aspects would play in. We would go to a city. We would make a deal with a hotel. We would find a hotel that had a quote-unquote lounge, but not too loungy, just a place where we could actually play. And the deal was we would get free rooms, and in some situations room and board, whatever, but we'd get that for free, and in return we would play for free. And in the process, we would be able to hit a city and kind of, network, radio, retailers. We tried to target certain cities that obviously had like a uni branch, since they were a distributor. And we played Chicago at the Marriott for a week, and we went to Atlanta and played, I think about a half a week. We went to Dallas. We did like a stand a couple of nights in Baltimore and Pittsburgh. And what it did was it created like a small little groundswell of fans. I mean, to this day in Chicago, for example, and in actually all the cities we hit, but we've always known in Chicago that almost everyone that was there at those shows are now all of them are going to the shows that we do whenever we go there again. So much so that actually my assistant, John Leal, he at the time was the manager of a Rose record store, and he was at those initial shows and became friends with the band, and I got to meet him, and that's what led to me hiring him when I think Rose got bought out and he lost his gig. But it was a great way to create a buzz for the band, really kind of cover all these bases, and be cost effective about it. And I mean, it was tough because they drove around in a 15-passenger Ford van. I drove, and we had a kind of a road manager and a sound man and a tech following us in a Ryder truck. And it was insane, but it worked.
What a great idea, though, especially to establish the group as non-traditional country, as something other than you expect.
Right, and then
really build that base.
And doing something that presenting it in a way
person would do from Nashville.
Yeah, exactly. No, I don't think anybody would do it from any genre of music, whether it was in New York, L.A., or whatever. But I mean, it worked. It was very hard during that period because traveling in a van was insane. I mean, I remember doing a run from Denver to Reno and driving 22 hours straight because of our lack of experience, misjudging the mileage factor. so that it's like, wait a minute, are we?
It's not that, it's only that.
We're not even out of Colorado. Yeah, it's only an inch on the map. We're not at Colorado yet, and we still got, and we got to be there tomorrow, and so. But I mean, we did that. We went through this whole period together, and I think we ended about October of '92. We started around May. So we did a whole run during the course of the summer, and by that time, me dealing with, working out of the hotel, and it was insane. But the thing that really hit me was that I needed to be in Nashville, because if I'm going to do business for this band, then that's where I needed to be. And the band also felt the same for themselves. We all needed to move up to Nashville, and I think that with the release of the record and getting signed to a major, and the reactions that the fans were giving the band through the course of the touring that we did, it all felt right. I mean, again, a very hard tour, but very rewarding in the sense that everybody realized, who saw the band, like, there's something going on here. And it gave everybody the feeling of like, okay, it's tough. And I mean, during the course of this period, From Hell to Paradise sold maybe 17,000 units. That was very disappointing. Excuse me. We had a lot of critical acclaim, which was great. And, the press loved this, and fans loved this, and the record company was very supportive, and paid the tour support necessary to get us through all this period. But again, it fell flat as far as sales, and we had a 2-album deal, 2-album firm deal, that enabled us to, or guaranteed us another record. So MCA was there, and so we all just felt, well, we need to start getting together and get up here. So I moved in October, the end of October of '92. I think Raul came in January of '93. Robert came up with me in October, actually, and he'd been seeing Tricia, and so they stayed together. Then Paul came up in March. Sorry. During that period, we had a guitarist named David Lee Holt, who decided in the beginning of '93 that he wanted to stay in Austin, and he was more interested in playing blues than country. And plus, the guy had just gone through a hardship period with us, of traveling in a van and selling 17,000 records. So, he was a little wary of like what the future had in store for everybody, and that was fine. So we ended up hooking up with Don Cook to do the next record, which was recorded, I think, in June of '93, and held some auditions in August for another guitar player, and through the recording, we used Brent Mason, and we got to a point where Nick, who knew the band from Miami, because he used to be in this band Iko Iko, which was this great local band in Miami. He was out in California, and he had bumped into Robert. I think it's like the ACMs or something, but he had bumped into him at some party while Robert was out there in '93, and said, yeah, I'd be real interested in seeing, if you guys would give me a shot. And Robert told him, gave him my number and said, call Frank, and he did, and so we set it up, and he flew himself out here and took his own shot at it. And the moment he started playing, it was like, wow, this is the guy. And we had auditioned a number of different guitarists, and they were all good, but it just, some of them were better than others, and some felt better as far as the vibe and just the melding of the personalities. But the moment Nick played, it just was like, he was it. And then his look and his camaraderie with the guys, and then knowing them from years when they were all playing in other local bands, together in the same city, but separately as far as the units. It just all made sense. So at the same time, we had picked up Jerry Dale as the sideman for the keyboard. And so we had an album under our belt that was ready to come out in February of '94, and the single, What a Crown Shank, came out in November of '93, and we just went forward.
Very adventurous.
It was very adventurous. I mean, it was like a long haul coming from, local clubs. When I first hooked up with the band, they were starting to get popular already, but they were still playing shows where there'd be 20 to 30 people there. I mean, when they first started, I'd heard that there was, sometimes more people working in the club than were actually watching them perform. But I mean, it was It was great. It was great. And, you know, the thing that was really interesting is that during that club period, there was no country venues in Miami, especially on the beach. The venues were all like rock or alternative venues, and you know, we would end up booking them in these places and go, oh man, they can rock. They just rock and roll band, right? Oh, they rock. Man, I'm telling you, these guys can rock. You know, and never saying they were a country band, because we did that once and we didn't get the gig, so we learned quick, and at a certain point, it dawned on me, even during that beginning period, that like these kids with mohawks and punk rockers and alternative guys, the speed metal kids, they were all getting off on this stuff, you know, and coming up going, you know, I hate country, but I love this, you know, if this is country, I'm into it. So it was exciting. It felt like there's potential here not only to break into the country market, but one day just break through across the board and cross over. So.
Well, what kind of tour are you going to put together behind the new album?
I'm sorry?
What kind of tour do you envision behind the new album?
Well, we want a headline next year.
Yeah.
Are you all right?
Yeah.
We want a headline next year, and we have plans to go to Europe in January. You know, we've been there this past May and did very well. We only played the UK. But this time we're going to go back, play the UK again, and actually hit a few countries in Europe. So we're going to do that at the beginning of the year. We're going to take some time off at the end of the year. We're chafing through the middle of November, a little past. Take time off and start up again in January. Go over there, come back. It'll be a solid month, so take a little bit of time off and then do some rehearsals. And then probably, I mean, we're kicking it around now, but we may start in February, we may start in March, but we want to start it off right around that period and go out and do theaters, And I mean, as the summer months come upon us, then we'll do fairs and whatever, a lot of outdoor shows, and that won't be necessarily a headlining factor because we just did a show, for example, last week with Tricia and Vince, who were the headliners, and then a few other acts before us. But in general, I think we really want to try to achieve a headlining stature. And, there's lots of schools of thought. Some people feel that, well, maybe it's not time, so you got to like hedge your bet and play it safe and do another opening slot routine. But, it's not like it's not working with Chapin because it's working great, but, they get an hour. And this band, I mean, there are times where I've seen this band do 3 hours plus. That's not on the norm. The normal show, if they're headlining, can be anywhere from an hour and a half to 2.5 hours, anywhere in that period. And the thing about this band live is it's like show and tell. The people get to see it, and you can't deny it. Once you see what they are, if you're not either aware of their music from the CD, or if you've just seen like some videos or heard some singles on the radio and you're interested and you get there, you can't deny it once you leave. And once you do leave, it usually is more than a small percentage of sales, so to speak, that you're going to get out of it. You're going to win over the fans immediately, and you're going to get a large part of those people going out and buying the record because they're that good. Some people could say it's like preaching to the choir. In other words, we go out and do theater dates, and you're going to get all the fans that are in there. But I don't look at it that way. I look at it as you're preaching to the choir in the sense that there are a lot of fans who already know who they are, but they bring people. That's another aspect of this band, is that the word of mouth is so great that other people come who haven't been there yet. And if that means it's a slower build than opening for 20, or for someone who's playing 20 to 30, or 15 to 20,000 people in an arena, well, yeah, that's great. I mean, that is great because you're playing to a lot of people. But a lot of times those people are buying popcorn or soda or T-shirts. They're just sitting down and they're coming in the middle of your set. And, this band has never been afraid to do things a little bit different. And not necessarily adhering to the norm, and again, some people's school of thought is that that's not the safe way or the right way, quote unquote, right way to do it. But, I don't know if there is a right way. I mean, maybe there is when you have a certain type of act.
Yeah.
But with an act like this,
All you can do is your way.
yeah, well, yeah. I mean, you can do it. All you can do it is your way. But also, sometimes that different. The fact that it is different makes it so good. I mean, again, I'd rather see the Mavericks. I'd want to see the Mavericks anytime. But if I had a choice of seeing them for an hour or two, I'd pick the two. And it's just a different vibe. And I think they've gotten to a level where we can achieve it. So.
Well, what do you see as the future for the movie? What lies ahead down the road?
Well, I think that there's a big future on the international front.
Yeah.
They seem to when we played in London and we played a small town in Ireland, but we also played Glasgow in Scotland and Manchester in England. I mean, everywhere we went there, they were rabid fans. I mean, they just get it. So it's not like they don't get it in the States. But when we arrived there, we played the Shepherd's Bush Empire. When we got there, we played Shepherd's Bush Empire, which is about a 2,000-seat capacity, a little over. And we sold it out. It was the second best sellout in the venue's history. And we're talking about, Pretenders, Elvis Costello, whoever played there. And there was an acceptance to the band, and it was word of mouth. I mean, we sold 500 or 600 tickets the first week, and it was never even advertised. It was just somebody heard it, and the word spread. And I think that, obviously, we're not going to go to every city in Europe and have that happen immediately. But I just think that they're not going to be presented so much as a country act in Europe as much as they'll be presented as an American band. Because that's really what they are. When people tell me that you've got a great band there, you've got a great country rock band, I like to correct them and say it's a country band that rocks. But ultimately, it's just an American band that rocks. Because their influences, their roots, everything stems from a period of time in the 50s and 60s that was as American as it gets, from Elvis to Buck Owens to Johnny Cash to Ray Price. I mean, all of that plays into it. And then you add the fact that all the guys played in various incarnations of cover bands that would do Beatles, Stones, the blues, country music. I know that Robert was in a band that did country covers. And Paul used to play in bands that had reggae in it, that played police covers. I mean, so you put all of that influence together, and you've got you've got what America is, which is really a melting pot of different nationalities. Well, this band musically is a melting pot of different styles and genres, but their influence really is rooted in what was the beginning of rock and roll anyway, which was really country meeting R&B, and I think that Europe gets that, and I think that that's an exciting future, part of our future. I think also that with the work and the touring that the guys do here in the States, and I think there seems to be a general broadening of the horizons, so to speak, of music in country radio today. We're also getting play on AAA radio. So I think that sometimes it takes time just to niche your own little mark, and then it grows. So for me, the future is just to continue what we're doing. Hopefully, bring on new fans, create an excitement that they continually create, and do it on an international level, do it on a national level. There isn't like a game plan that we have to, we want to play the Garden by 1997. I mean, sure, it would be great. And one day this band has the potential to do that and more. Because back to the fans that back in the club days in Miami, people that had nothing to do with country music that loved them, and then the people who loved country music that loved them. And I think that's what's happening still today. As their fan base grows, you get to see all different types of fans coming in. Country music fans, rock and roll fans, alternative music fans.
And when you have that kind of acceptance on that many different levels or different groups, I think that your future is kind of like wide open. It's unlimited.
I think you nailed it.
All right.
Yeah, thanks.